And there are growing tensions as Britain prepares to impose a 14-day quarantine on all international arrivals. And those who breach the rules could be fined or prosecuted. IAG, the parent company of British Airways, says it may challenge the plan in court. The IAG chief says the government did not consult with the aviation industry before introducing the legislation. He's called the measure irrational and disproportionate. France has threatened to retaliate with measures of their own unless the scheme is scrapped. And Germany has advised against travel to Britain. Greece and Spain say right of entry will depend on Britain's coronavirus situation. At the same time, the British Medical Association has called on the government to immediately make face coverings mandatory on public transport. The rule only kicks in from the 15th of June. The UK is easing its lockdown despite still recording tens of thousands of new infections each week. There have been 176 deaths in the past 24 hours. The UK's death toll is nearing 40,000, with more than 280,000 infected. Now, for more on this, Ollie Barrett joins us from London. Quite a bit of ground to cover, Ollie. First, is the government likely to reconsider its 14-day quarantine policy?
Well, not yet. It will come in on Monday and it will apply to international arrivals. It is a 3-week period at first, and the government has promised that it will review it at the end of that 3-week period. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it could only last for 3 weeks, or the government may decide to extend it after that period with some modifications. It is deeply controversial for all sorts of reasons, with critics saying if you're going to have a quarantine like this, you needed to have it earlier in the outbreak. The UK government insists it's following the science in that regard, and that when the outbreak is on the downward trajectory here, while on the upward trajectory in some other countries, then this is a useful tool that it can have to keep the outbreak under control here in Britain. As I say, this will come in to effect on Monday, but that doesn't mean it will necessarily last very long.
Ollie, tell us about the plans to grant exemptions then to travellers from certain countries.
Yeah, these so-called air bridges or air corridors. And actually, this is one of the ways that the UK may be able to slightly tweak the quarantine without removing it. It will be able to save some face, perhaps, by agreeing these bilateral deals with individual countries, saying that, for example, France, travellers coming from France to the UK won't have to go into quarantine when they get here. We understand that the UK government is in negotiations with a number of countries. Spain, Greece, Turkey, for example, are very keen to have British tourists this European summer, so they are on the list of countries that the UK is talking to. But as you were suggesting, there are other countries who will not want necessarily to reach an agreement with the UK like that for now, while the outbreak in the UK is still quite large. So certainly there are ways that the government is going to tinker with this scheme, and certainly there are ways that exemptions might be granted to individual countries. But it's also deeply controversial, and the tourism and the aviation sectors are just dead set against it.
Yeah, one last question for you, Ollie. Why the delay in implementing the face coverings rule?
Well, again, the UK government has insisted all along that it's following the science, and the UK's scientific advisors have said that they have not seen particularly strong evidence that face masks for the wider general public in all settings actually have a meaningful impact on the spread of the COVID-19 outbreak. They have, though, settled on a position which is that they believe that in enclosed spaces, that wearing a covering of some sort can stop you spreading the virus if you have it to other people. So it's about protecting other people that are near you. There was certainly also earlier in the outbreak a great deal of concern that if the British public had been told they had to wear surgical standard masks whenever they went out in public, that would reduce the supply available to healthcare workers and essential workers who needed it the very most. So it's been very controversial throughout. And given the British government's previous position on face coverings, many people are now saying, well, look, if it's necessary now on public transport, as the numbers getting on transport are going to rise again, why wasn't it necessary earlier?
All right, thanks for that update. Ollie Barrett speaking to us from London.